Oh, John Rock.
That's a good boy.
Hey, that's great.
Before there were shows like Yellowstone, there was Dallas. It premiered in 1978 and ran all the way to 1991, long before prestige TV became a thing. And it didn't just entertain people, it hooked them. At its core, Dallas was a glossy American soap opera built around money, power, and bad blood. The story followed the Ewings, a wealthy Texas family locked in constant conflict, running the independent oil empire Ewing Oil, while also sitting on the sprawling cattle lands of Southfork. On the surface, everything about the show felt carefully put together. The sets looked solid. The characters were larger than life. Every scene felt deliberate, like everything was exactly where it was meant to be. But that's only if you don't look too closely, because hidden beneath all that are moments the editors somehow missed. Small slips. Blink and you'll miss it mistakes. Proof that even a show this tightly produced wasn't perfect. And that brings us here. One Dallas scene was never edited the way it should have been. It made it to air exactly as it was shot. Once you notice it, you can't unsee it. So let's slow things down and take a closer look at the blooper that somehow stayed in the final cut. The shot that changed everything. When Dallas debuted in 1978, television wasn't ready for it. Not because it was strange, but because it arrived quietly. Nighttime soap operas weren't a proven format yet, and Dallas didn't storm in as a weekly spectacle. It eased its way onto screens as a 5-hour miniseries, almost like a test run. The response was mild, encouraging enough to continue, but nowhere near explosive. The second season followed with a full 24 episodes, and still, the numbers stayed low. The show existed. It worked, but it didn't dominate conversations. It hadn't found its nerve yet. That changed in March 1980. In the final episode of Season 3, J.R. Ewing, played by Larry Hagman, was shot. The moment wasn't dressed up or softened. It landed suddenly, then lingered. The episode ended without answers, leaving viewers suspended in silence. Who pulled the trigger? And more importantly, how could the show go on without resolving it? That question did what 3 seasons couldn't. It locked people in. Almost overnight, Dallas transformed from a struggling series into a global fixation. Ratings didn't just climb, they multiplied. More than 100 million viewers around the world tuned in, not out of habit, but out of need. The Ewings weren't just characters anymore. Their betrayals, schemes, and fragile alliances became weekly rituals people planned around. Timing helped, too. When the network moved Dallas to Friday nights, it landed in a world already shifting inward. Years later, Hagman would explain it plainly during a conversation with Larry King. The economy was tight. Nights out were expensive. Babysitters, movies, dinners, they all added up. People stayed home. Television filled the gap. Dallas didn't chase that audience. It was already there, waiting. With its sudden dominance, Dallas didn't just succeed. It showed the industry what was possible. In its wake came a wave of glossy nighttime dramas built on wealth, rivalry, and moral decay. Knots Landing, Dynasty, and Falcon Crest. Each borrowed the same foundation: powerful families, beautiful surfaces, and constant tension just beneath. By the early 1990s, they were all gone. Dallas outlasted most of them, but even it eventually reached an end. After 14 seasons and 357 episodes, the series signed off on May 3, 1991. The story lingered in memory long enough to justify 3 TV movies, small echoes of a once dominant force. Then, years later, it resurfaced again. In 2012, TNT revived Dallas for a new generation, bringing back Hagman, alongside Linda Gray and Patrick Duffy. Familiar faces returned to familiar ground, carrying old grudges into a different era. What makes all of this more striking is how accidentally it began. The show's very identity came down to a casual decision. Creator David Jacobs had written a story in 1977 about an oil company called Ewing Oil under a development deal with Lorimar Television. When executive Michael Filerman read it, he liked the story but changed the name without much debate. Houston made sense for oil. Dallas sounded better, and that was how Dallas got the name Dallas. Dallas was the less classy version of Dynasty. David Jacobs once pointed out something that often gets lost when people talk about Dallas. For all its money and power plays, the show was never built to look extravagant. Southfork was large, yes, but it wasn't a palace. The Ewings ate breakfast in jeans. Wealth existed, but it wasn't constantly on display. The luxury stayed grounded, almost casual, like it didn't need to announce itself. That restraint mattered, especially once Dynasty entered the picture. Dynasty didn't just raise the bar, it ignored it entirely. The sets were louder, the clothes were sharper, the lifestyle was pushed to a level that bordered on parody. Characters dressed for breakfast. Jewelry appeared where it had no practical reason to be. Even intimacy came accessorized. Where Dallas hinted at wealth, Dynasty performed it. Under almost any other circumstances, Dynasty would have been dismissed as tasteless. Too much money, too little subtlety. But the mid-1980s had a different appetite. Excess wasn't embarrassing anymore. It was aspirational. And in that moment, something strange happened. Dynasty, the louder and flashier show, was widely seen as the classier one. That shift didn't happen in a vacuum. Both series rose during the same political weather, and both began to fade as that climate changed. As the Ronald Reagan presidency wound down, so did the cultural patience for televised indulgence. Dallas held on longer, but the mood was moving elsewhere. Dynasty, built entirely on spectacle, couldn't adapt. By the time George H.W. Bush took office, the show was already running out of oxygen. It didn't survive his first 100 days. Looking back, the contrast feels almost symbolic. Dallas thrived on control, on power that looked lived in. Dynasty thrived on display, on wealth that needed to be seen to exist. The man everyone loved to hate. Yes, JR made enemies everywhere he went. He schemed, double-crossed, and pushed people until they broke. He was shot twice, which felt less like bad luck and more like an occupational hazard. But to Larry Hagman, the version of JR the audience settled on was incomplete. Hagman always argued that JR wasn't the monster people wanted him to be. He saw the character as practical rather than cruel, ruthless rather than evil, a businessman first, which already put him on shaky moral ground, but not a man without rules. In Hagman's view, JR took care of his family. That mattered. He didn't see a villain. He saw an oil man doing what oil men do. That tension between how JR behaved and how he justified himself is where the character came alive. Creator David Jacobs understood that contradiction better than anyone. He later described JR as something television wasn't quite ready for at the time. A villain who also functioned as the lead. Not a hero corrupted, but a protagonist built from sharp edges. Someone you weren't meant to admire, yet couldn't stop watching. What makes that evolution interesting is that it wasn't planned. In the earliest draft of the pilot, JR was more straightforwardly bad, a familiar type. The real experiment, Jacobs thought, was supposed to be Bobby. He imagined him as a player, a playboy, his father's favorite. Charming but immature. Likeable, yes, but flawed in ways that felt fresh. Bobby was meant to be complicated. The network didn't agree. CBS wanted clarity. They wanted contrast. Bobby needed to be good, cleanly, visibly good, so JR could remain the dark force pushing against him. Complexity was trimmed away in favor of something easier to read. That decision followed Patrick Duffy everywhere. Duffy later explained that there was one rule he could never escape. Bobby had to be good, not mostly good, not morally conflicted. Just good. Even Pamela's role, he noticed, ended up orbiting that idea, reinforcing Bobby's virtue rather than challenging it. The hero stayed fixed. The villain kept moving. And that imbalance changed the center of gravity of the show. JR, allowed to bend, twist, and justify himself, became unpredictable. Bobby, locked into decency, became stable but static. Over time, viewers didn't lean toward the safer option. They leaned toward the man who surprised them, the one who knew exactly how awful he could look and still showed up anyway. That's how JR won, without ever being redeemed. He wasn't misunderstood because he was innocent. He was misunderstood because he was honest about what he was. An oil man, a provider, a problem. And once television opened the door to that kind of character, it never fully closed again. Whether or not JR lived depended on Hagman's contract. By the end of the 1970s, television had discovered the power of not finishing a sentence. Cliffhangers were starting to matter, and Dallas was paying close attention. The show had already tested the idea once. A miniseries season had ended with Sue Ellen pregnant and injured in a car crash, an image designed to linger long after the credits rolled. So when the ratings finally began to climb, the producers decided to go bigger. The logic was simple. If suspense kept people talking, then uncertainty could keep them waiting. Dallas producer Leonard Katzman later explained that the goal was to give audiences something to carry with them over the summer. A question heavy enough to survive months of speculation. If viewers cared enough, they would come back in force the following season. That gamble paid off almost immediately. The question they chose was ruthless in its efficiency. Who shot JR? On screen, it looked like a bold storytelling move. Behind the scenes, it was also leverage. Whether Larry Hagman returned after the shooting depended on money. Hagman wanted a raise, and the storyline gave everyone an escape hatch. If negotiations collapsed, JR could simply die. Hagman understood that risk perfectly. He later described the plot as a double-edged sword, one that gave producers and CBS a clean way to cut him loose if his demands went too far. As the months dragged on, the pressure escalated. Rumors were allowed to breathe, talk of an ambulance catching fire, whispers of plastic surgery. JR survives, but emerges with a new face, played by a different actor. It all sounded theatrical, and that was the point. Hagman suspected the show wouldn't dare kill its most dangerous asset. He was right. The longer the silence stretched, the stronger his position became. JR was shot in the episode A House Divided, which aired in March 1980. Viewers wouldn't get an answer until November. Those 8 months turned speculation into obsession. Bookmakers took bets. Conversations stalled mid-sentence. Even Queen Elizabeth II couldn't resist asking. When Hagman was presented to the Queen Mother, she pressed him for the truth. He declined, politely and firmly. Not even royalty got an answer. To keep the waters muddy, the show leaned into misdirection. A gag reel was filmed showing cast and crew members taking turns shooting Hagman. A deliberate distraction meant to confirm nothing and fuel everything. When the episode Who Done It finally aired on November 21, 1980, the world stopped waiting. The shooter was revealed to be Kristen Shepard, Sue Ellen's sister, played by Mary Crosby. Until then, Crosby was best known as Bing Crosby's daughter. Overnight, she became something else entirely. She later joked that the role turned her into a trivia answer and unexpectedly famous in very small countries. The dust settled quickly after that. Hagman got his raise. He also secured a stake in the series. J.R. lived. Dallas moved on, but television never quite went back to the way it was before. Because once audiences learned how powerful an unanswered question could be, silence became just as important as dialogue. And Dallas had taught the industry exactly how long people were willing to wait, as long as the payoff felt inevitable. Larry Hagman and Patrick Duffy drank a lot on set. By the mid-1990s, the weight of earlier years had finally caught up with Larry Hagman. In 1995, he underwent a liver transplant, the result of a long, unbroken relationship with alcohol. It wasn't a scandal when it surfaced. It felt more like a quiet confirmation of something that had been visible all along, just never fully confronted. On the Dallas set, drinking wasn't hidden. It was routine. Years later, Patrick Duffy, who played J.R.'s younger brother Bobby, looked back on those days with a kind of measured honesty. Spending time with Hagman often started simply enough, maybe with a single glass of champagne together. But where Duffy stopped, Hagman kept going. Lunch meant drinks with the meal. Late afternoon brought another round before filming wrapped. Afterward, there were drinks in the dressing room, then more at home before dinner, wine with dinner, and something extra before bed. Duffy remembered it as fun, at least at first. Social. Easy, but it was also clear he couldn't match the pace. He pulled back early, not because he felt danger creeping in, but because he knew his limits. There was no dramatic moment of realization, just a quiet decision to ease off before the habit hardened. Hagman saw it differently. He insisted he was never drunk, explaining that he took small slugs throughout the day instead. From 9 in the morning to 9 at night, the hours stretched wide. 12 long hours, enough time to consume a lot without ever tipping fully over the edge, at least not in a way that felt obvious. In his mind, it was controlled, managed, spread thin enough to feel normal. That's what makes it unsettling. No wild binges, no public collapse, just a steady accumulation, day after day, carried alongside scripts, rehearsals, and the effortless menace of J.R. Ewing. Power on screen, control in the performance, something quieter unraveling behind it. By the time the reckoning arrived, it didn't feel sudden, it felt inevitable. And once you see how calmly it all unfolded, it becomes harder to separate the man from the character. Not because they were the same, but because both were built on the same illusion, that you can keep pushing forward forever, as long as nothing looks broken yet. Sue Ellen was originally conceived as a minor role. In the pilot episode of Dallas, Linda Gray is barely there. She appears on screen, but she isn't introduced. No name, no lines, just a presence sitting beside J.R., easy to overlook if you're not paying attention. At that point, the role wasn't meant to last. Casting had their eye on Mary Fran instead. Sue Ellen, as a character, was still undecided. Replaceable, temporary. Gray felt that reality immediately. She later recalled sitting on the couch during the first episode while the camera circled the room, collecting reaction shots. Everyone else had something to say. Larry Hagman dominated the scene. Patrick Duffy spoke when needed. Jock, Miss Ellie, and Pamela, all of them were given words. Gray wasn't. She was the only one left silent, watching the scene unfold without a script to lean on. So, she filled the silence herself. As J.R. talked and talked, Gray fixed her gaze on him and let something shift behind her eyes. Confusion hardened into judgment. Curiosity turned sharp. In that quiet moment, she decided who this woman was and why she might be sitting next to a man like him. The questions played out internally. Who he was, why he behaved this way, how unbearable he seemed, and what kind of marriage could possibly hold that together. When the camera finally landed on her close-up, she let all of it surface without saying a word. The effect didn't go unnoticed. At CBS, executives saw it instantly. The chemistry between Hagman and Gray wasn't planned, but it was undeniable. That single look reframed the relationship. What was meant to be a background role suddenly felt essential. The network paused, leaned in, and decided Sue Ellen wasn't going anywhere. But staying came with a cost. As the series grew darker, the writers pushed Sue Ellen into a familiar corner. Her struggles were reduced, again and again, to alcoholism. Over time, it stopped feeling like character depth and started feeling like a loop. Gray carried it for years, until the repetition wore thin. By 1989, she'd had enough. She later explained that the problem wasn't drama or difficulty. It was stagnation. 8 years of the same storyline felt excessive, almost dismissive. She didn't leave in anger. There was no dramatic exit, no slammed doors or public outburst. Just an understanding that the character and perhaps the show had stopped listening. Looking back, it's hard not to see the irony. Sue Ellen began as a woman without a name, defined only by where she sat. She became one of the show's emotional anchors, then slowly disappeared into a single trait she could never outgrow. And it all started with a silent close-up, a glance that said more than the script ever planned to allow. If you watch that pilot again, knowing how it ends, the silence feels heavier. Like something important was already being decided, long before anyone put it into words. Hagman modeled J.R. after a real-life oil baron. Long before Larry Hagman ever stepped into J.R. Ewing's shoes, he was already circling the world that would define the character. He grew up in Texas, close enough to oil country to see how that kind of money moved and what it did to people. As a young man, he took work wherever he could find it, digging ditches, building swimming pools, hard, grinding jobs for an oil man with 4 sons in Weatherford. The work stayed with him for all the wrong reasons. Hagman later described it as soul-destroying. Long days, physical exhaustion, a future that felt already written. Somewhere in the middle of all that labor, he made a quiet decision. That life wasn't for him. Acting wasn't a dream yet, just an exit. A way out before the work flattened him completely. What he didn't realize at the time was that he was paying attention. Years later, speaking to Ultimate Dallas, Hagman explained that the real education wasn't about oil itself. It was about oil families. He watched how power shifted inside that household, how proximity to money caused rivalries. When the oil man died, the family didn't close ranks. It fractured. A war broke out over who would take control of the business. In the end, one son emerged on top. Hagman never forgot him. That son became the blueprint, not in broad strokes, but in attitude. The entitlement, the certainty, the belief that winning justified whatever came before it. When Hagman eventually shaped J.R., he didn't invent those instincts. He remembered them. He recognized how ambition looked when it had nowhere else to go but forward. That's why J.R. never felt theoretical. He wasn't built from television cliches or writerly imagination. He was assembled from memory, from dirt under fingernails, from men who expected inheritance as destiny, from families that treated succession like combat. So when J.R. fought his brothers, bullied his rivals, and protected what he believed was his, it didn't feel exaggerated. It felt observed, like someone had been watching long before the cameras arrived. Dallas may or may not have led to the fall of communism. At its peak, Dallas didn't just dominate American television, it traveled. Quietly at first, then unmistakably. The show made its way across borders that were meant to keep ideas out, reaching as far east as Russia and Romania, places where television was tightly controlled, and nothing made it to air by accident. In Romania, the series was forbidden outright. That changed only when Nicolae Ceausescu, the country's authoritarian president, was convinced it was harmless. Someone framed Dallas as anti-capitalist, a cautionary tale about greedy Americans tearing each other apart. On paper, it sounded safe. The show was approved. What followed was not what anyone planned. Romanian viewers didn't see moral decay. They saw abundance. They saw space, comfort, and choice. The Ewings lived loudly, wastefully, and without apology. And once that image settled in, it didn't stay contained. Larry Hagman later suggested that the effect was destabilizing in ways no censor could undo. Watching the Ewings, people began asking questions. Why don't we have this? Why can't we live like that? Greed, he believed, did what politics couldn't. It made authority feel optional. The timing was unforgiving. In 1989, Ceausescu and his wife were killed, and Romania began stepping out from under decades of brutal rule. The walls didn't fall all at once, but something cracked. According to the Washington Post, once the regime collapsed, the scenes Dallas had previously censored were restored and aired in full. What had once been rationed was suddenly visible. The show returned, unfiltered. But the story doesn't end there. Hagman himself maintained an unexpectedly cordial relationship with communist Bucharest. Years later, it emerged that his image had been used in advertisements for the Russian oil company Lukoil. In return, Hagman accepted a substantial payout. He kept it quiet, very quiet. He didn't want the arrangement known while he was alive. The details surfaced only after his death. It's an uncomfortable footnote, but a fitting one. Dallas sold the fantasy of power and oil and consequence-free wealth. Behind the scenes, its biggest star navigated those same forces in the real world, crossing ideological lines with the same ease J.R. crossed moral ones. There was a Romanian version of Southfork. Romania didn't just watch Dallas, it absorbed it. So deeply, in fact, that one man tried to recreate it. A Romanian tycoon named Ilie Alexandru looked at J.R. Ewing and didn't see a character. He saw a template. According to the Texas Observer, Alexandru wanted to live like J.R., so he did the most literal thing possible. He built his own version of Dallas. The project was called Parcul Vacanțe Hermes, but no one really used that name. People called it Southforkscu. It rose in Slobozia, a surreal echo of Texas excess dropped into post-communist Romania. Alexandru named the hotel Dallas. He added horse stables, polo fields, even a replica of the Eiffel Tower, as if ambition alone could stitch together every symbol of power he admired. For a moment, it worked. Or at least, it existed. Then it didn't. None of it remains today. The buildings fell into disuse. The fantasy collapsed. Alexandru himself ended up in prison, convicted of financial crimes. His Southfork never had a second life. It vanished the way imitations often do, quickly and without nostalgia. The contrast is hard to ignore. The real Southfork never pretended to be anything else. Southfork Ranch, where the Ewings lived on screen and where Dallas filmed its exterior shots, is still standing, still recognizable, still trading on the weight of what it once represented. In 1985, the ranch mansion opened to the public, not as a fantasy of power, but as a place people could walk through. Today, it functions as a conference and event center. Weddings happen there. Tours run daily. Visitors step into the rooms, cross the grounds, and pause in front of the artifacts. You can even see the gun that shot J.R., preserved behind glass like a piece of controlled history. Patrick Duffy realized leaving Dallas was a fiasco. By the end of Season 8, in 1985, Dallas crossed a line it could never fully uncross. Catherine Wentworth, played by Morgan Brittany, aimed her car at her half-sister Pam. The attack missed its intended target and landed somewhere worse. Bobby Ewing was struck and killed. One of the show's moral anchors was gone, wiped out in a moment that felt abrupt, even by Dallas standards. Behind the scenes, the decision was practical, not poetic. Patrick Duffy's 7-year contract had expired, and he was ready to leave. Dallas had become massive, but it was still an ensemble, and Duffy believed the timing was right to step away. At the height of the show's popularity, he thought he could pivot into something built around him alone. A starring role, a cleaner slate. It didn't happen. He later admitted the move went nowhere, describing it as another failed business decision in a long line of them. The work he hoped for never materialized. Meanwhile, Dallas kept moving without him, but something felt off. When the call came asking him to return, the answer surprised even him. He realized the truth quickly. For all its chaos and excess, Dallas had been the best place to work. More than that, it had brought him back to his closest friend. So they brought Bobby back. The problem was how. At the end of Season 9 in 1986, viewers watched Pam step into her shower. Steam filled the frame, and there he was, Bobby, alive, calm, impossible. The reveal landed like a betrayal. The explanation followed immediately. The entire previous season had been a dream. Everything that had happened, Bobby's death included, was erased in seconds. Audiences didn't forgive it. What was meant to be a reset felt like a dismissal of emotional investment. Viewers had mourned Bobby. They had adjusted. Now they were being told none of it counted. The backlash was swift, and the year entered television history under a permanent label: the Dream Season. The strangest part is where the idea came from. It wasn't born in a writer's room. It came from home. Duffy later explained that when he told his wife the producers wanted him back, her condition was immediate. He could return only if the entire last season had been a dream. No compromise. When Duffy raised the idea with showrunner Leonard Katzman, he discovered it was already on the table. So they did it. Dallas survived the decision, but something shifted. The show had always played with credibility, but this time it asked viewers to forget rather than follow. For a series built on long memory and slow grudges, that was a dangerous request. Victoria Principal refused to return to Dallas because of Shakespeare. For Victoria Principal, the exit from Dallas was designed to look final. In 1987, Pamela Ewing was seemingly killed in a car crash. A clean narrative break meant to close the door as the actress stepped away. It felt definitive, a tragedy that matched the weight the character had carried for years. But Dallas rarely left doors closed. The following season, Pam returned, changed. Surgery had altered her appearance, and the role was now played by Margaret Michaels. The character lived on, reshaped to fit the story's needs. It was a continuation that mirrored the show's long-standing belief that no ending had to stay permanent. Principal wanted no part of it. Unlike Patrick Duffy, she never came back. The decision wasn't about timing or negotiation. It was about meaning. Years later, speaking to Deadline, she explained how she saw Bobby and Pam, not as soap opera fixtures, but as something closer to myth. In her mind, they were the Romeo and Juliet of Dallas, a love story defined by longing, interruption, and loss. Something fragile enough to be damaged by one wrong move. She made it clear that once she left, whatever choices the producers made were theirs alone. Her responsibility, as she saw it, was different. She chose not to risk cheapening what the relationship had been. No dramatic comeback, no nostalgic return, not even for closure. She believed that some stories were better preserved by absence. That resolve was tested. To keep her from leaving, the producers offered money. A lot of it. Enough to make her the highest-paid actress on television at the time. It was an offer designed to be irresistible. When she turned it down, she didn't dress it up as bravery or principle. Speaking later to Ultimate Dallas, she said simply that it was time to go. Walking away taught her something about herself. She couldn't be bought. In a show famous for power plays and reversals, that choice stands out. Pamela Ewing's story ended not with a twist, but with restraint. While Dallas continued to rewrite its past, principle protected hers. She left Bobby and Pam exactly where she believed they belonged, unfinished, intact, and untouched by desperation. Were you a fan of Dallas? Let us know in the comments which episode stayed with you the most. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.